Cybersecurity is in flux across the public sector, with traditional processes and tools proving inadequate for today's global threats. In response, the federal government has intensified efforts to secure mission-critical data through executive orders, department memoranda, and other official directives. But questions remain about how to effectively address evolving future threats. On May 16th, Public Sector Ignite 2023 will bring together leading cybersecurity experts and government luminaries to explore what's next in cybersecurity and lay out a roadmap for public sector leaders looking to modernize their cybersecurity foundation. Don't miss the one-day experience offering insight into both next-gen technology and real-world best practices. Be ready for what tomorrow brings. Register today at govexec.com/events.
This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's April 13th, 2023. I'm Ross John Fortune. The Social Security Administration employs 60,000 people, and it serves the entirety of the American public. But the union representing the agency's workers say that the customer service problems at the agency will only get worse if funding doesn't increase soon. SSA was one of the agencies most affected by the COVID-19 crisis. Republicans in Congress have blamed backlogs in service delivery on telework, while Democrats have pointed to underinvestment in the agency's technology and its workforce. SSA has 1,200 field offices across the country to serve citizens, but staffing levels are at a 25-year low. Additionally, the agency's trustees reported dire news for Social Security. According to a report released earlier this month, SSA will no longer be able to pay full benefits in 2033, a year earlier than previous expectations. The agency will certainly be near the center of budget conversations in the coming months. GovExec senior reporter Erich Wagner covers the federal workforce. After a short break, he'll join me to discuss the Social Security Administration's workforce concerns.
Cybersecurity is in flux across the public sector, with traditional processes and tools proving inadequate for today's global threats. In response, the federal government has intensified efforts to secure mission-critical data through executive orders, department memoranda, and other official directives. But questions remain about how to effectively address evolving future threats. On May 16th, Public Sector Ignite 2023 will bring together leading cybersecurity experts and government luminaries to explore what's next in cybersecurity and lay out a roadmap for public sector leaders looking to modernize their cybersecurity foundation. Don't miss the one-day experience offering insight into both next-gen technology and real-world best practices. Be ready for what tomorrow brings. Register today at govexec.com/events.
With a workforce of approximately 60,000, the Social Security Administration administers Americans' retirement and disability benefits. But union officials representing the agency's workforce have noted burnout and poor service delivery at SSA recently. The union has also called for more funding for the agency in the wake of inflation and broader national economic conditions. GovExec senior reporter Erich Wagner covers the federal workforce. He joins me now to talk about the Social Security Administration's workforce concerns. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I mentioned burnout. What is the burnout situation at the Social Security Administration?
Well, it's not good. Basically, this is sort of a really long time coming. Over the last decade or so, I guess since 2010, the number of beneficiaries has gone up 25%, but that has corresponded with, a decade's worth of underinvestment in the agency, and the agency itself, its workforce is at a 25-year low right now. So basically, there's way more work and way fewer people And that just means that everyone has a much bigger workload. And, the union says that the agency is not good at handling this and sort of resorts to, very taskmaster tactics to try to, you know, squeeze every last bit of work out of people.
A real Ben-Hur situation there, I imagine. If there is staff leaving, as has been posited, how will operations change? Who is going to be affected? What will the impact be on Americans?
Well, we're already seeing it. Frankly, this is not a recent development. This has been a problem before the pandemic. It was exacerbated by the pandemic with the closure of field offices, except for sort of, emergency appointment only services. But basically, union employees say that, they used to have, just as an example, Social Security offices used to sort of have this schedule where sort of on Wednesdays, I think it was, one day a week, basically, they would close in the afternoon, the field offices, just so they could, work on back end processing of various things. And that doesn't happen anymore. Now the focus is entirely on intake, and you kind of process it in what few you do back end processing stuff in whatever few free moments you have. Um, you know, people who, people are assigned phone duty to try to help the teleservice centers. People are, there is a lot to try to like alleviate the lines at the field offices, and that negatively impacts other parts of what what the offices are supposed to be doing. Additionally, after years of working on the backlog in disability determinations, the pandemic saw that rise back up as part of some of these, issues with the pandemic and understaffing and all of this. And the backlog of disability determinations, I believe, is back up to 1 million. So, we are already seeing the service degradation.
Never a good sign when that is part of the president's management agenda, the customer service notion. Hiring. What is SSA doing about bringing in new people? What is the hiring situation at the agency?
Well, yeah, they got, I think it was 785 million additional dollars in this year's funding over the last year from Congress, and a lot of that is getting eaten up by what they describe as fixed cost increases. Basically inflationary costs on the agency's you know equipment, raises for current employees, things like that. But they are trying to hire quickly. They have special hiring authority from OPM to make that faster. But the union says it's not enough. People aren't getting hired quickly enough to deal with the attrition that they are still seeing. And in a lot of cases, some of these jobs they say are sort of really underpaid. It is a difficult job to. Social Security cases can be very complex at times, and it takes years of training to become proficient. On top of that, the entry level pay for a lot of these jobs, before locality pay at least, is like $15.75 an hour, which is basically minimum wage in a lot of states. So you get good candidates that, or who maybe in previous decades would have come to Social Security, and they're not going to because they can get a better pay at the VA, or they can get better pay in the private sector. And so I think the challenge among many challenges here is that it is hard to recruit for jobs that are not competitive.
And it should be noted, of course, that we do have an aging population, as you have noted, as far as the increased workload. So it's not exactly an easy job either. So selling it, I imagine, in the hiring sphere is not as easy as it would be in other agencies. We've mentioned the union a fair amount, AFGE. What is the union's solution, and who does the union blame?
The blame question is, I think there's a lot to go around in the union's estimation. Congress obviously for failing to fund the agency adequately for the last 10, 12 years. Management, in a lot of cases, Social Security historically has been one of the most fraught agencies when it comes to labor management relations. So the union has a lot of ideas for, ways to like upgrade processes, and they largely get ignored, they say. One thing they say would help with workload is, in, not field offices, but, OHO, Office of Hearing Operations, and, and teleservice center employees, people like that whose jobs are, can be done remotely. They are not allowed to do them remotely. I believe the cap on telework is maybe 2 days a week. It varies depending on the subcomponent, but these folks say that they are more productive at home, and telework would at least help deal with some of the work-life balance issues that are inherent in when you have such a huge workload. Additionally, they want to upgrade some of these underpaid positions within the GS scale, but they say the agency had previously talked about doing this in some cases, but now is saying, no, we're not even considering it. So I think there's a lot of ideas out there, but it's not clear, one, whether which ones are feasible, and two, which ones management would even entertain if they were. And I should say, for the first time this week, I really got the impression that the union leaders are just sort of fed up with the acting commissioner, Kilolo Kijakazi. They talked about how, in some agencies you have, agency heads who entertain, direct communication with union leaders. And apparently she came to a meeting once, a union council meeting once, and basically said, if you have any issues, go through, the Office of Labor Management Relations, which frustrated a lot of people, especially considering, like I mentioned before, the historic distrust between these two parties, particularly, through that office. So there's a lot of blame to go around if you ask AFGE.
Well, let's end on those relations. Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? Is management labor relations, are they this continuing line of Social Security having this trouble? Is anything changing there?
Yes and no. I think people were cautiously optimistic when President Biden came into office and sort of set out the big, we are going to be collaborative with our unions edicts. But, during reentry, it was the negotiation over return to traditional work sites. It was a tough negotiation, but the union thought that they had secured this, plan that, between the 3 months between their deal and when reentry would actually happen, they would be able to negotiate on a component level. Field offices would be able to negotiate with, the field office union would be able to negotiate with field office management. Hearing and operations, same thing. But really, by the time reentry happens, sort of the agencies in most cases had sort of just dismissed proposals completely out of hand, except for in the case of Office of Hearing Operations, which apparently was a very productive one. Since then, I get the impression that things have not gone particularly well in the way of labor management relations. One of the union officials who spoke on Monday said basically, we wouldn't be talking to you if we had a productive relationship. We would not be, spelling all this out to the media if we thought we had a good faith partner. So that's where things stand, and not much has really changed.
Yeah, we don't hear as much about other agencies when it comes to these issues. Now, again, Social Security has a particularly difficult situation, but you do not hear about this from other places, other union shops in the government. So it is, I think, notable, and certainly your reporting has highlighted that. Eric, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Happy to be here.
Cybersecurity is in flux across the public sector, with traditional processes and tools proving inadequate for today's global threats. In response, the federal government has intensified efforts to secure mission-critical data through executive orders, department memoranda, and other official directives. But questions remain about how to effectively address evolving future threats. On May 16th, Public Sector Ignite 2023 will bring together leading cybersecurity experts and government luminaries to explore what's next in cybersecurity and lay out a roadmap for public sector leaders looking to modernize their cybersecurity foundation. Don't miss the one-day experience offering insight into both next-gen technology and real-world best practices. Be ready for what tomorrow brings. Register today at govexec.com/events.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortuna. We want to thank Erich Wagner for joining the program today. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter at GovExec. Check us out on Facebook or LinkedIn by searching for Government Executive. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.